cozying up to Sinn Féin or the occasional sham fight may be how it is in Stormont, but here in Brussels it's very different. For me, it is much more a battle a day. When De Bruyne brought a report to this Parliament on the peace programme, I didn't mince my words. This is a report of verbiage, not substance. Just as much of the peace funding itself was spent upon froth. The irony, of course, of an IRA Sinn Féin MEP being rapporteur on a report on peace will not be lost on thousands of people in Northern Ireland whom her wicked organisation made victims through its pernicious terrorist campaign. It's no surprise to me that she can produce a report talking about peace without a single blushing reference, without a scintilla of regret as to how we came to need peace. Because, make no mistake about it, of her IRA's decades of terror. Nor am I surprised that she makes no mention of one of the gross failures of the peace programme, namely the inequality in distribution between the two communities in Northern Ireland, with the Protestant Unionist community not getting its fair share of funding. Not something, of course, likely to concern Mr Brune. Finally, let me place on record that the relative peace we have today in Northern Ireland is primarily due not to some EU peace programme, but to the remarkable tenacity, courage and sacrifice of our marvellous security forces who faced down the IRA terror which robbed us of peace for so long. Nor have I shied away from taking on MEPs from the Republic when they too needed put in their place, like Miss Harkin from the west of Ireland. How many constituents has she buried, murdered by terrorists? How many people have died in her constituency because the organisation that Mr Brune represents decided they would die in pursuit of a political campaign? The IRA murdered 2,000 of my constituents. So no one will lecture me in this House about the deep-seated feelings that I have, and no one will contradict me with justification for pointing out that the people that put so many of my constituents in their graves are the IRA which Mr Brune represents in this House. And to now see them in the government of my country is stomach-churning, and to find that they are there because they murdered, and as a buy-off so as they weren't murdered again, makes it even worse. I've also had my say several times about the obscenity of unrepentant terrorists at the heart of government. On the 10th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, I had this to say. Some find much to celebrate. I do not. Why? Because it is the Belfast Agreement which rewarded 30 years of terrorism in Northern Ireland by undermining both justice and democracy. Justice by granting an early release amnesty to all duly convicted terrorist prisoners, and democracy by prescribing that unrepentant terrorists must be in the government of the region they had ravaged with terrorism for decades. That is to be achieved by the inequity of mandatory coalition. The region which I represent is the only region in all of the European Union where citizens are denied the fundamental democratic right to vote a party out of office. Why? Because the Belfast Agreement by law stipulates all parties must be in government if there is to be a government. That is the Belfast Agreement, and that is wrong. It is something to be denounced, not celebrated. Thank you. Being an international parliament, there are many opportunities to raise worldwide issues. I've spoken strongly in defence of Israel and utter condemnation of Mugabe and a host of other matters. But a particular dedication of mine is raising persecution, especially of Christians across the world. I've raised cases in Burma, in Congo, in Cuba, Pakistan, Vietnam and India. And I've also sought to get the focus on the fact that though the EU speaks loudly about support for human rights, when it comes to big nations like China, it tends to ignore the persecution in the interest of trade, and that is wrong. Is this debate just an annual ritual to preen our human rights conscience? Or are we serious in the EU about forcing real change by countries who are serial abusers? Yes, the EU protests, but is our action measured in inverse proportion to the trading importance of those we target? Take India and China. Both countries we are wooing for trade. Just how serious are we in pushing the human rights agenda with them? Why do our trade agreements not have real human rights teeth? Is the truth that trade matters more to the EU than repression? I look at India with its caste-based discrimination, its appalling record on bonded labour and sex trafficking, and widespread religious freedom abuses. And then I discover that all we have is an ad hoc dialogue with India and the absence of meaningful engagement on human rights issues. Little wonder, Mr. President, things are not improving. I must also say that sometimes our focus is skewed. When it comes to development aid, the EU presses hard on a rights agenda, including promotion of abortion, even where it offends the local culture, as in Kenya, where EU-funded NGOs used the money for funding abortions in breach of local custom and law. Shouldn't our focus be on fundamental rights and our development money better used to help in food and water provision rather than in peddling our own agenda, even under the guise of a health policy? Thank you. This is but a brief snapshot of some of the 200 speeches I've made on your behalf here in the European Parliament in the last 5 years. I hope you've enjoyed listening, as I have enjoyed the tremendous privilege of representing you here. This is not my seat or the seat of any party. It is your seat, and it is for the people of Northern Ireland to decide who holds it. Thank you for watching.